Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 4th chapter in the book of Deuteronomy. We did one over a year ago. We made it all the way up until the 14th verse. We're going to take it from verse 15 to 31. What we already covered is a call for obedience. What we are about to read today is the prohibition of idolatry and the consequent warnings for indulging in that which is prohibited, and what comes after it is a testimony and an expression of the uniqueness of Yahweh as a deity, which supplements the incentive not to indulge in idolatry, because when we have him, that's all we really need. And he does call us to obey him, and part of the second commandment was against idolatry, and idolatry, it can be argued, is the sin which leads to every other sin, because once we detach ourselves from our infallible moral compass, then all bets are off in every other aspect of our life. So it is with good reason that the frequency of this sin is mentioned more prolifically than just about any other in the New Testament. We're just going to review the call for obedience, verse 1. And now, O Israel, listen to the laws and the judgments which I am teaching you to do, so that you live, and shall go in and possess the land which Yahweh Elohim of your fathers is giving you. So the motivation and incentive for keeping and honoring and obeying and listening, the word listening entails more. It's more than physically absorbing. It's learning and applying what you hear. But it's all designed to give them life, temporal life and spiritual life in the land of the promise, and they are to be a covenant community. And he reminds them that 23 at Baal Peor in verse 3, that many who were destroyed from your midst, all the men who follow Baal Peor, but you who are clinging to Yahweh your Elohim are alive today, every one of you. So there is the consequence of death for disobedience, prolonged disobedience. The wages of sin is death, but the wages of righteousness and obedience from the Old Testament Old Covenant terms was life. And this the other reason that they did this, that they obeyed, was to give themselves a testimony and a reputation for witness amongst their neighbors. And you shall guard and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding before the eyes of the people who hear all these laws. And they shall say, only a wise and understanding people is this great nation. For what great nation is there which has Elohim so near to it, as Yahweh our Elohim is to us whenever we call on him? So the secret and the source and the strength and the power behind their wisdom and their flourishing and their prosperity is the Yahweh who gave them the land of milk and honey, and a covenant. If they had faithfully obeyed and honored the terms of that covenant, they would have flourished in the promised land. But because the sin of idolatry eventually caught up with them, but the nearness of Elohim was a motivation and incentive. And as we read in the 29th verse, and the range we'll be covering today, seek Yahweh with all thy faculties and all thy capacities. And so the implicit thing is that he is knowable, and he does want to be known. He is near. He is as close as the mention of his name. He speaks. His voice can be found right here in this book. It's an arm's length away. You can literally touch the portal to his voice, and he does listen to the prayers of the saints. And what great nation is there that has such laws and righteous judgments like all this Torah which I put before you on this day? So this will be a source of pride and boasting for the future generations, because by the honoring and obeying of this law, their wisdom will show, their prosperity will flourish. Only keep yourself and keep your life diligently, lest you forget the words your eyes have seen, unless they turn aside from your heart all the days of your life, and you shall make them known to your children and your grandchildren. So the life and the future life of the covenant community is tied to obedience. Obedience is closely connected with life. We guard our lives by keeping these commandments, and not only our lives, but our children's lives and their children by teaching them in. And then in the 10th verse, we read that he references an example of Horeb. That's Mount Sinai. That's where he's going to read in the opening voice. So he does appeal to their memory, such as at Baal Peor, when those who disobeyed and rebelled were slaughtered. And Mount Sinai was the event some 40 years ago. And they were there at the mountain. The audience that he is addressing, a lot of them were alive. And Yahweh spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard a voice of words, but saw no form. You only heard a voice. So the fact that he has no physical, tangible, or visible form is foundational to the idolatry injunction. We'll get on that in the. But he made his covenant known, and everything else. The Ten Commandments there was the site of Mount Sinai. 15th verse, lesson itself. Therefore, diligently keep yourselves, for you saw no form when Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire. So he had no physical form. They knew it was him. They heard his voice. They had they were awestruck under his presence. There's clearly something spectacular, but they had no definable form. He is the invisible creator of all that is visible, and to represent him as a being without any material properties or corporeal qualities, to represent him in physical likeness is to degrade the creator to the status of something that we created. So idolatry reverses the image. We are made in the image of Elohim. We swap that all around when we make idolatry. We model them over ourselves, our own whimsy, damaged, black perverted hearts. These gods are not moral role models. They are drama junkie teenagers with maladapting coping mechanisms whose fits and tansies just cause the cosmos to revert to chaos. And he came in the midst of the fire, so he guided them through the Exodus as a fire and as a cloud, and he had physical manifestations, but for all these manifestations there was never any evidence of any physical form. There was no definable shape, and he has no physical form for us to behold. Hence we mustn't construct idols or worship them. Lest you should do corruptly, and shall make for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. So the any figure, that can be a human. These idols had human qualities, animal features, and just any figure means beast on the ground, bird in the sky, fish in the water, frog by the pond, man, lion in the wilderness, or just anything, crocodile, just anything, shark, fish. They were all there. They all had representative and likenesses throughout the disparate pagan cultures, because the human norm was to bow down to idols. This is across the world and apart from Judaism. So the Jews were extremely unique in that their religion, they could not bow down to idols, because just about polytheism and idolatry were closely connected. But these gods, there were gods and goddesses, where our God is male, but we anthropomorphize him. He's not male in the sense that he has a male sexual organ or any physical features. We just anthropomorphize him with the term father more frequently than mother. There are a few passages in the book of Isaiah where he's compared to a mother, so he does have a maternal quality, but we refer to him as father. The likeness of any beast that is on the earth, or the likeness of any winged bird that is in the heavens, the likeness of any creature that creeps on the ground, or the likeness of any fish that is under the water in the earth. So top to bottom, sky to dirt, and below the sea, anything with life form, any life creature is not fit to be depicted in as a representative reference to the object of their worship, who commands that he be not be represented in idols, and they not bow to any idol of any other likeness. Whether he doesn't have anything in particular against any of these life forms. It's just that the fact that they are the life forms make them less. That makes them a part of the creation, and therefore less than the creator. And the creator is meriting and deserving to be worshipped in the manner that he prescribes to us. Unless you lift up your eyes to the heavens, and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of the heavens, and you be drawn away into bowing down to them, into serving them, which Yahweh your Elohim has allotted to all the peoples under all the heavens. So the temptation to worship stars, there was astrology, there was just all this, pseudo-prophecy invested in the movement of the stars. Stars were worshipped by a lot of ancient cultures, and a lot of people lived their lives and predicted that their calendars based on these celestial bodies. And as they appear very small from Earth, but they are in fact gigantically large light vessels. Our sun is a star, and it is, perhaps below average even in size, and so the temptation is to worship these things, but we are still worshiping less than the creation, because when we worship any item in creation, there are many stars. These all have, no star is unique in that it is a star, but there is only one figure worthy of worship. So to worship a plurality that has no similar amount of uniqueness is abject folly. And the stars are servants of Elohim, and not the other way around. He appointed them to to give some truth and some guidance, to the to civilization. But we can time our calendars and they make sense. They're all part of a wise and perfect design, but we diminish the efficaciousness of that design when we worship the inferior entity within that design. But Yahweh has taken you out and brought you out of the iron furnace and out of Egypt to be his people, an inheritance as it is today. So this is the purpose of their redemption and ransom. They were only 40 short years ago slaves in bondage in Egypt, and they had since been a desert wandering nomad people in restless pursuit of this land of promise. But through their own disobedience, they made it longer than it needed to be. But they were his chosen people. They were selected, and he brought them out of the iron furnace. The furnace of affliction is where the quality Christians are made. Now, you can be a good Christian without ever having suffering, but you cannot become the best Christian you are capable of being without having ever entered into and emerged from the furnace of affliction, unscathed but refined. And Yahweh was enraged with me because of your words, and swore that I would not pass over the Jordan, and that I would not enter the good land when Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. So Moses, the great leader, the one who was raised in royalty to lead the people, his enslaved people, to independence and liberty and the land that had been promised their ancestors, he was denied access in spite of all that he had done, all that Yahweh had done through him, because of a single sin. He had acted rashly in breaking the water at the mountain of Morah, somewhere in the book of Numbers, but he had a sinful response to the sin that was festering in the camp. So sin is like yeast. It goes up, and this led to the mass murmuring among the people. So there is a mutual blame between the community itself and Moses. He had a sinful, but it's a lot easier to sin when you're surrounded by sin than it is to resist sin. And Moses was otherwise an exemplary model, but even he was denied entrance into the promised land, and the book of Deuteronomy closes with him getting a gaze of it, but he's still not allowed to set foot in it. For I am to die in this land. I am not passing over the Jordan, but you are passing over and shall possess that good land. So there are only two individuals who were born in Egypt, lived in the Exodus, and settled in Israel. Those were Joshua and Caleb, the two spies who had responded, the two spies respectively representative of Ephraim and Judah, I think. Joshua's Ephraim, Caleb might be Judah, but they, of the 12 scouting delegations, one from each tribe that was sent, there were literal giants in the promised land, and this struck fear in 10 of the 12, but Joshua and Caleb gave the faithful course of action. Let's go in. We have Yahweh on our hands. He parted the Red Sea for us. I'm sure he can enable us to overcome giants no matter how tall. But because the spirit of cowardice spread throughout the camp, and this led to more murmuring, they were imposed. The scouting expedition lasted 38 days. They added 38 years to their desert wandering because of that. But even Moses was set to die in this land. He was a stone's throw away. He had the valley. He could see the land of promise, but he couldn't set foot in it, and that's just the way it was, and he was content and serene and resigned to his fate. Guard yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, which he made with you, and you shall make for yourselves a carved image in any likeness Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you. So the covenant that word appears some 27 times in the book of Deuteronomy, and it is not originally a theological term. It is a geopolitical term. These were the terms of arrangement which existed between a superior power and the inferior power. So the covenant was always initiated by the superior power, and this superior power was the heavenly king. So he is incapable of breaking his end of the covenant, and if we break our ends, there are consequences and warnings, and we are not without warning. But there are also promises of prosperity and blessing for disobedience, and the way to deny yourself the prosperity, spiritual and temporal, was to indulge in idolatry, was to succumb to the world that was literally all around it. Every other nation had them, so Israel might have felt isolated. When they saw them, there must have been something enticing. They'd never seen anything like it. So that temptation was always there, but so too was the command. They were commanded to stay away from this stuff. For Yahweh your Elohim is a consuming fire, a jealous El. This is quoted in Hebrews 12:29. The idea of a consuming fire means he wastes no time in burning. Consuming means he doesn't burn people in hell for perpetuity, although it is certainly he is capable of burning without consuming, such as we witness his theophanic manifestation to Moses in the burning bush, which was not consumed. But it's not in his nature to send people to hell to burn for an eternity. Their bodies are instantly evaporated in the lake of fire. Then their disembodied immortal soul goes out to dwell in solitary isolation and seclusion for an eternity. No one to talk to, no one to comfort. But that term jealous, it is wrong to think of jealousy in human terms. Now, to be clear, there is a difference between envy and jealousy. Envy is always only and invariably sinful. It is the root of sin and is a host of all other evils, but there is such a thing as a righteous jealousy. Now, every envious person is jealous, but not every jealous person is envious. Now, Yahweh is a self-sufficient being. He needs nothing. Therefore, he is incapable of being envious, but he is jealous for his name and his covenant and his people. And he will consume you with fire as a consequence for betraying that trust and forsaking that faith. When you bring forth children and grandchildren, and shall grow old in the land, and shall do corruptly, and make a carved image in any likeness, and shall do what is evil in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim, to provoke him. So this is a warning. This is a setup. It's gonna the cause of the effect. This is the cause. Verse 26 is the effect. I shall call the heavens and earth to witness against you on that day, that you soon completely perish from the land which you pass over the Jordan to possess. You do not prolong your days in it, but are completely destroyed. So the creator and controller of the heavens and earth has the heavens and the earth and all the resources therein at his disposal, and he's going to call both of his creations to witness against those who indulge in idolatry, those in the covenant community. And he's a consuming fire, so they will completely perish. They will be destroyed efficiently, totally, and thoroughly by him. They will be removed from the land across the Jordan River, that is the land of milk and honey, the land of the nation of Israel. And so once more, disobedience results in death, but obedience results in life, as was communicated in the passage which precedes this. And Yahweh shall scatter you among the people, and you shall be left few in number among the Gentiles, where Yahweh drives you. So the consequence for violating the covenant was to be vomited out of the land. The covenant dictated their future in standing and security in the land, but they were going to be scattered, and eventually they were. The northern kingdom of Israel first by Assyria in 722, then the kingdom of Judah in 586. That's when the temple in Jerusalem were destroyed. There were 3 waves of the scattering, but that has been a fact of life for the Jews ever since the age of Gentiles, which began with Nebuchadnezzar, 586 BM. That marks the dawn of the age of the Gentiles, and the Jewish identity has largely been defined by diaspora. It wasn't until relatively recently, 1948, that the rightful ownership of the land of Israel returned to the Jewish people. And there you shall serve mighty ones, the works of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear, nor eat nor smell. So if you want to worship idols, go to idol worship place and be with idol worship people. I will vomit you out of the land and send you to a land where that is acceptable, that is permissible, that is legal, that is encouraged. But among my people I will have none of it. And these works of men's hands, once more, these are created beings, not creators, with no metaphysical substance outside of the physical wood and edifice. They have no life in them. They have no power. They cannot see. They cannot hear. They are inanimate objects which represent life but have no life in them. They are immovable, and they cannot eat or smell, yet people sacrifice to them. And it's quite, maybe the idols weren't thought of as gods, but they were certainly thought of as access points to those gods. But from there you shall seek Yahweh your Elohim, and shall find, when you search for him with all your heart and with all your soul. So they have the promise that even in the exile he will be available. He can be found. The land is no substitute for the disposition of the heart when it comes to worshiping him, when it comes to seeking him out, when it comes to pursuing a relationship with him. There are 2 implications in this passage: that he is knowable and he wants to be known, but he cannot be known on our terms. He gives us the guidelines with which we might approach and apprehend and understand who he is and what he can do and just everything about him. But it involves a total commitment and dedication, involving all your faculties and all your capacities, your heart, might, mind, soul, everything else, all the rest, et al., etc. And that we have to give it our all in order to get all that he deigns to reveal about himself. It's a total workout. It's something else. In your distress, when all these words shall come upon you in the latter days, then you shall return to Yahweh your Elohim, and shall obey his voice. So the positive effect of the exile was that it purged out the idolatry from the Jews. Now, by the New Testament time, they had deviated to another extreme, that of legalism, and they sort of missed God because they were so caught up in the minutiae of their rules. But the exile did permanently purge out the idolatrous inclinations of the Hebrew people, to their credit, and they were more inclined to obey, having been removed from the land. They had took it for granted because they did not earn it. They went into a land that was already settled, that they conquered through, the man working in the sky, working on their behalf. For Yahweh your Elohim is a compassionate El. He does not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them. So we learn a lot of things about Yahweh, our Elohim. He is merciful, he is compassionate, he is forgiving, he is long-suffering. He will never leave or forsake you. We can forsake him, but he will never forsake us. and he will not destroy you. He may allow harm to come your way and test you and send you for the ringer, but I always tell myself that God did not bring me this far just to drop me on my head whenever I am feeling beaten up by the world and everything else around me. And he cannot forsake or forget the covenant, but we can, because we're humans, we're imperfect creatures, and the temptation is literally all around us to not abide by these principles as it was for the ancient Israel. And that is something he swore to them. Now, covenants were entered into with oaths, and oaths carry the gravity of words and commitment. But that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.